The string quartet fell silent as Jariah Montgomery stepped onto the rose-strewn aisle of Cascade Gardens. 600 guests rose in unison, their collective gasp echoing through the autumn air. Her cocoa skin glowed against the white silk gown, its train sweeping behind her like morning mist. At the altar, Kimari Thornton's hands trembled. The 32-year-old founder of Atlanta's fastest-growing tech startup watched his bride approach, fighting back tears. His best man squeezed his shoulder, a silent reminder to breathe. Through her veil, Jariah caught snippets of whispered praise. "Look at them," an older woman murmured. "Black love at its finest." The comments made her stand taller. She and Kimari had earned this spotlight. She, a partner track attorney at 28. He, the visionary behind Thorntech Solutions. Their vows rang clear across the manicured lawns. "You're my North Star," Kimari declared, his voice steady despite his shaking hands. "My sanctuary in the storm." Jariah's response came from her heart. "In you, I've found my match. In mind, in spirit, in dreams." The reception blazed with joy. The couple spun across the dance floor, moved through toasts, and thanked their guests. Yet beneath Kimari's brilliant smile, something lurked. A shadow, quick as a blink, darkening his eyes whenever he thought no one watched. But Jariah noticed. She'd always noticed these fleeting moments, attributing them to wedding stress or business pressure. Tonight, though, as she watched him charm their guests, she sensed something deeper in those shadows. She pushed the thought aside. This was their perfect day, the merger of two powerful families, the union of two rising stars. As the evening wound down, she took his hand, feeling its slight dampness, its subtle tremor. "Ready to start forever?" she asked. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "With you? Always." Morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows of their midtown penthouse, casting long shadows across Italian marble. Jariah traced her fingers along the smooth countertop, watching Atlanta's skyline shimmer beyond their terrace. 3 weeks into marriage, and their home still carried the pristine feel of a magazine spread. She sipped her coffee, watching Kimari prepare for his morning run. His routine never varied. Compression gear, smartwatch, wireless earbuds. But lately, he'd taken to changing in their walk-in closet, away from her gaze. "Board meeting at 10?" she asked, noting his tense shoulders. 9. The Series B funding presentation. He checked his watch. "You'll knock them dead in court today." She smiled, remembering the case files spread across her desk. A class action suit that could make her career. "Dinner tonight? That new place on Peachtree? Rain check? Late call with Singapore investors." His kiss landed near her ear, quick, distant. Across the street, a window washer's platform swayed in the breeze, its shadow dancing across their floor. Jariah tracked its movement, thinking how odd it was, sharing space with someone, yet feeling them slip away. She watched Kimari disappear through their front door, his running shoes silent against plush carpeting. The coffee in her hand had grown cold, bitter. Something was shifting between them, subtle as a shadow's edge. The honeymoon suite at the St. Regis cast soft shadows across their king-sized bed. Jariah emerged from the bathroom, wearing white silk, her wedding dress now carefully hung. Rose petals traced a path across Persian rugs, champagne chilled in silver buckets, and Atlanta's lights sparkled 20 stories below. Kimari stood at the window, still in his tuxedo pants and dress shirt, bow tie undone. His reflection in the glass showed tight jaw muscles, knuckles white against the window frame. "Dance with me?" Jariah pressed play on her phone. Their first dance song filled the room. He turned, attempted a smile. My feet are killing me. These new shoes. Then take them off. She moved closer, reaching for his hand. We've barely touched since the ceremony. His fingers twitched away from hers. Maybe we should just sleep. The flight to Maldives leaves early. Kimari. She caught his gaze in the window's reflection. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He loosened his collar, putting space between them. Just tired. You know how many hands I shook today? The champagne bubbles died in their untouched glasses. Outside, a police siren wailed past, its red lights painting their walls in brief, harsh strokes. You've been tired every time we've gotten close these past months. Jariah's voice cracked. I told myself it was wedding stress, but... Don't. His word cut through the music. Please, not tonight. She watched him grab sleeping clothes and retreat to the bathroom. The door's soft click felt like thunder. Alone, Jariah sank onto the bed's edge. Their wedding video would show perfect smiles, practiced dances, rehearsed joy. But here, in the quiet of their first married hours, something felt terribly wrong. She picked up a rose petal, crushed it between her fingers. Its sweet scent mixed with doubt, with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Over spilled coffee. Jariah watched the dark liquid seep into their cream carpet, her hand still frozen from knocking against Kimari's shoulder as he tried to slip past her. Stop running. Her words rang through their bedroom. Stop hiding. Kimari stared at the spreading stain, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Dawn painted their walls pink, catching the tears that suddenly spilled down his cheeks. I should have told you. His voice came out raw. Before the wedding, before the engagement, before you fell in love with someone who isn't... He choked on the words. Jariah stepped closer. Who isn't what? Who isn't what you think? His hands shook as he sank onto their bed. When I was born, doctors couldn't tell my parents if I was male or female. The silence stretched between them like glass about to shatter. I'm intersex, he continued, words tumbling out. They chose to assign me male. Surgery at 6 months old. More procedures through childhood. Hormone therapy since I was 12. Jariah's legs gave way. She slid down the wall, her silk robe catching against the textured wallpaper. My parents thought they were protecting me. They said nobody needed to know. His laugh came out bitter. I built this life, this persona, the successful businessman, the perfect husband. All this time, Jariah's voice shook. Every time you pulled away, I wanted to tell you, but each day it got harder. Each success made the fear worse. He looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time. I couldn't bear to see your face when you learned the truth, like I'm seeing it now. Raw morning light filled their bedroom as Jariah paced, her mind racing through every moment of their relationship. 3 years of dating, 18 months engaged, each kiss, each touch, each promise now cast in strange new shadows. Her steps traced circles on the plush carpet, memories spinning like autumn leaves in her mind. She couldn't stop thinking about their fertility discussions, their plans for children. When she brought this up, Kimari's attempt to discuss medical advances only fueled her rage. This wasn't about possibilities or procedures. This was about trust. About watching her try on wedding dresses, standing silent while she shared dreams of motherhood with her family. The bedroom walls seemed to close in as past moments clicked into place. His tension during intimacy, his insistence on separate bathrooms in their new home, his careful deflection of questions about his childhood. Each revelation struck like a physical blow, leaving her breathless. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind. Shanice Barrett had questioned Kimari's perfection, sensed something beneath his polished surface. Jariah had dismissed these concerns, proudly declaring they held no secrets. The memory of her own defensive words now tasted bitter. When Kimari tried to approach her, Jariah's body recoiled instinctively. She couldn't bear his touch, couldn't reconcile this stranger with the man she'd married. His protests that he remained the same person she'd fallen for rang hollow. The truth stretched between them like a chasm. The person she'd loved had been built on careful omissions and calculated silence. His voice cracked as he spoke of survival, of years spent protecting his truth. But his pain, raw and real as it was, couldn't bridge the gulf of betrayal. Each explanation only underscored the depth of his deception. Through the window, Atlanta stirred to life, unaware that her world was shattering. Morning sun painted golden strips across their bedroom floor, marking time as Jariah's shock crystallized into resolution. She needed space, needed time to process this new reality where nothing felt solid. She gathered her purse and keys with trembling hands. Kimari's declaration of love followed her to the door, but the words felt empty now. Her wedding ring caught the morning light, no longer a symbol of trust and promise, but a weight she couldn't bear. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Kimari alone with his exposed truth. In the hallway, Jariah pressed her back against the cool wall, closing her eyes against tears that refused to fall. Love without trust, she realized, was like a house built on sand, destined to crumble at the first strong wind. Jariah moved through their penthouse like a ghost, sleeping in the guest room, leaving for work before dawn, returning after dark. Kimari's texts went unanswered, his voicemails unheard. Their shared spaces became a minefield of memories, each room holding moments she now questioned. That fourth evening, she came home early. Rain pelted the windows, thunder rolling across the Atlanta skyline. She found Kimari in their home office, surrounded by medical records spread across his desk. Papers yellowed with age chronicled a childhood of surgeries, hormone treatments, doctor visits, the documentation of decisions made long before he could speak. She read over his shoulder. Surgical notes, consent forms signed by his parents, photos of a baby with ambiguous genitalia. Clinical terms blurred before her eyes. Seeing his history laid bare struck her differently than hearing his words. These papers told the story of a child shaped by others' choices, molded to fit a binary world. But understanding didn't ease her anger. The rain intensified, drumming against glass. Kimari noticed her presence, his shoulders tensing. Her reflection watched them both in the window. Two people who'd shared a bed, shared dreams, now separated by secrets thick as storm clouds. Silent minutes stretched between them until Kimari broke first. He spoke of childhood shame, of learning to hide, of building walls so high he forgot how to lower them. His words painted pictures of playground taunts never received, bullies never faced, because his parents had sealed his truth behind surgical scars and hormone prescriptions. Jariah absorbed his pain, but it didn't diminish her own. She described her shattered trust, her fear of future lies. What else might he be hiding? What other truths lurked beneath his carefully constructed surface? She'd married a man whose very identity had been sculpted by scalpels and secrets. Thunder cracked overhead as years of Kimari's suppressed anguish burst forth. He spoke of darkness in dressing rooms, panic in doctors' offices, terror that someone might discover his truth. Each milestone in his life, school, dating, business success, had been shadowed by fear of exposure. His parents had promised protection, but their solution had trapped him in a prison of silence. Lightning flashed, illuminating tears on both their faces. Jariah saw beyond her pain to recognize the depth of his trauma. Yet she couldn't forget the calculated deception that had preceded their vows. Every dinner with her family, every conversation about their future, every shared moment had been tainted by his choice to hide. The storm raged as Kimari tried to explain how disclosure felt impossible. Each passing day had added weight to his secret, until truth became an avalanche he feared would destroy everything he'd built. Success had become his armor, achievement his shield. Thornton's triumph had given him a new identity to hide behind. Rain streaked down windows like tears as Jariah confronted the magnitude of choices made before Kimari could speak. She saw the weight of expectations, from parents, doctors, society, that had pressed him into a mold he'd never chosen. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that their marriage had begun with a fundamental breach of trust. Documents fluttered in air-conditioned breeze, each page a chapter of pain neither of them had authored, but both now had to read. Medical terminology stared up at them: gender assignment, surgical intervention, hormone optimization. Clinical words that had shaped a life, created a narrative, built walls between husband and wife. A distant siren wailed through the storm, its cry mixing with thunder. Jariah gathered her coat, her keys. She needed distance from these revelations, space to process the collision of empathy and betrayal in her heart. Kimari watched her go, his silence heavy with unspoken words, his body still as stone. The elevator descended, carrying her away from their fractured truth. In her mind, wedding vows echoed, for better or worse, in sickness and health. No one had mentioned in truth or lies, in disclosure or deceit. She pressed her forehead against cool elevator walls, wondering if love could survive secrets revealed too late. Ayanna Whitfield's corner office at Emory University Hospital offered a view of rain-soaked gardens. As chief of pediatric psychology, she'd guided countless families through crises. Now she watched her best friend since law school crumble into her leather sofa. Jariah pulled her knees to her chest, discarding her usual professional composure. Her suit jacket lay crumpled beside her. Mascara traced dark paths down her cheeks. She hadn't slept in days, not since discovering the medical records. Ayanna listened without judgment as Jariah poured out the story. Her trained eye caught the tremors in her friend's hands, noted the raw cuticles, saw the weight of sleepless nights in dark circles beneath red-rimmed eyes. "He was born different," Jariah whispered. "His parents chose surgery, chose silence, chose everything for him before he could speak." She pressed her palms against her eyes. "But he chose to marry me without telling me." Across town, in a private room at the Capital City Club, Kimari sat across from Dr. Rashawn Foster. The older man had mentored him since his first startup failed 6 years ago. Now, at 72, Rashawn's silver hair and quiet wisdom commanded respect throughout Atlanta's business community. "My wife found the medical records," Kimari confessed, his whiskey untouched. "Everything's out now. My parents' decisions, the surgeries, the lies." Back in Ayanna's office, she poured her friend mint tea, letting silence create space for truth. As a psychologist, she understood the weight of secrets, the complexity of identity. As a friend, her heart ached seeing Jariah's pain. You're thinking in binaries, Ayana said softly. Right and wrong, truth and lies, male and female. But human experience resists such clean categories. At the Capital City Club, Rashawn studied his protege. He'd watched Kimari build walls of achievement around himself, construct a fortress of success to hide behind. Now, those walls were crumbling. You built Thornton from nothing, Rashawn said. Faced down venture capitalists, market crashes, competitors, but you never faced your truth. Rain streaked both office windows, connecting these separate conversations like tears on Atlanta's face. In each room, pain sought understanding. Betrayal sought context. Love sought survival. Ayana refilled Jariah's tea. What frightens you more? That he kept this secret, or that you never saw through it? The question struck home. Jariah's hands shook. As a lawyer, she prided herself on reading people, on seeing truth beneath testimony. Had she been so blinded by love, or had she seen signs and chosen to ignore them? Meanwhile, Kimari's whiskey remained untouched as Rashawn spoke of his own son, who'd come out as gay in 1985. He chose truth despite danger, lost friends, opportunities, family, but he gained himself. This is different, Kimari protested. Is it? Both stories speak of hiding to survive. Both speak of fear stealing truth's voice. Two conversations mirrored each other across Atlanta's rain-soaked evening. Two friends offered wisdom, trying to build bridges across chasms of pain. Two hearts sought answers to questions that had no easy solutions. Love that demands perfection breaks under pressure, Ayana told Jariah. The question isn't whether he should have told you sooner. The question is whether your love can embrace complexity. Your parents chose surgery, Rashawn said to Kimari. Society pushed you towards secrecy, but you chose to stay silent when truth mattered most. That choice was yours alone. As evening deepened, both conversations wound toward their ends. Neither offered clear answers, but both planted seeds of understanding. In both rooms, silence held questions about forgiveness, about truth's price, about love's capacity to heal or hurt. Jariah gathered her jacket, hugged Ayana goodbye. Kimari shook Rashawn's hand, finally sipping his cold whiskey. Two people, bound by love and separated by secrets, stepped out into Atlanta's rain-washed night, carrying new perspectives like tender shoots after storm. First came whispers at the Royal Social Club, where old money gathered over brandy. A banker's wife mentioned Jariah's absence from Sunday service. A retired judge noted Kimari's empty seat at the Urban League meeting. Social media amplified suspicion. Photos of the golden couple vanished from Jariah's Instagram. Thornton's stock price dipped as Kimari missed two public appearances. The gossip machine churned. Marriage troubles? Financial scandal? Health crisis? Then Martha Wellington, wife of Kimari's board chairman, overheard a fragment of truth at her private physician's office. Medical records, gender assignment, surgery. The whispers grew teeth. At Richardson and Blake Law, Jariah's secretary intercepted calls from reporters fishing for details. The Atlanta Business Chronicle pulled their planned cover story on Thornton's expansion. 3 major clients postponed meetings with Kimari, citing scheduling conflicts. Their phones buzzed with false concern. Just checking on you. Here if you need to talk. Heard some strange rumors. At Sweet Auburn Baptist Church, prayer circles formed, not to offer support, but to exchange fragments of gossip between amens. Deaconess. Mitchell spoke of unnatural things in hushed tones. Sister Jenkins suggested the devil wore many masks. Thornton's board called an emergency meeting. William Wellington, Martha's husband, watched Kimari defend his leadership while speculation buzzed among shareholders. Two venture capital firms quietly withdrew from negotiations. A Pentagon contract hung by a thread. The country club at Peachtree Hills removed their wedding photo from the notable members' wall. The Atlanta Symphony Orchestra rescinded their invitation to chair the annual gala. Social invitations evaporated like morning dew. Jariah's mother, Judge Barrett, fielded calls from concerned friends. Each conversation carved new lines around her mouth, deepened the frost in her voice. At her weekly bridge game, she heard her daughter's marriage discussed like a cautionary tale. Dr. Marcus Montgomery, Jariah's father, stopped joining his golf partners for post-round drinks. He couldn't bear their pointed questions, their performative sympathy. His daughter's pain became public entertainment. Kimari's parents retreated to their lake house, screening calls. Their decades-old decision to choose surgery, to enforce silence, faced public scrutiny. Church friends stopped visiting. Medical colleagues grew distant. At the Fox Theater's opening night, Atlanta's elite watched two empty seats in the orchestra section. The mayor's wife whispered behind her program. A state senator's husband raised knowing eyebrows. Their absence spoke louder than presence. Donations to Thornton's charitable foundation slowed. Organizations that once courted Kimari's support now declined his offers. The Black Business Association delayed his Innovation Award indefinitely. Their gated community buzzed with speculation. Security footage of Jariah entering at odd hours circulated among neighbors. Someone leaked Kimari's medical delivery schedule to a gossip blog. Old friends chose sides. Ayanna received cold shoulders at medical conferences for supporting Jariah. Rashawn's business advice was questioned for the first time in decades because he stood by Kimari. Atlanta's black upper class had celebrated their wedding as a symbol of excellence. Now they wielded the couple's struggle as proof of deception. Their pain became cautionary tales at dinner parties, their truth twisted into warnings about appearances versus reality. In 6 weeks, a dream crumbled. Success that took years to build faced erosion by whispers. Their separate sanctuaries, courtroom and boardroom, offered no shelter from judgment's storm. Judge Shanice Barrett's Buckhead mansion cast long shadows across manicured lawns. Sunday dinner, once a celebration of family achievement, had transformed into a war council. Crystal glasses caught dying sunlight as Shanice paced before her daughter, pearls clicking with each sharp turn. Marriage annulment. She placed legal documents before Jariah. Marcus pulled strings. Judge Matthews will handle it quietly. The dining room suffocated with old money pressure. Family portraits watched from walnut-paneled walls. 4 generations of Barrett women who'd married powerful men, maintained appearances, protected the family name. Great-grandmother Barrett, first black woman to own property in Buckhead. Grandmother Catherine, who'd married a state senator. Shanice herself, federal judge and queen of Atlanta society. No scandal, Shanice continued. No media. We'll cite fraud. Medical records sealed. Your reputation stays intact. Jariah stared at the papers, each word sharp as broken glass. The Barrett family Bible sat nearby, its gilt edges catching light. How many marriage ceremonies had it witnessed? How many secrets had it kept? People already talk. Shanice's voice cut through memory. Martha Wellington asks pointed questions at charity boards. The Symphony Guild whispers. Your father can't show his face at the golf club. Outside, sprinklers hissed across perfect grass. Inside, generations of expectations pressed down like storm clouds. Shanice pulled out society page clippings, Jariah and Kimari's engagement announcement, wedding photos, charity ball coverage, evidence of a perfect life now tainted. What will you tell your children? Shanice pressed. How will you explain their father's condition? What about your position at the firm? The judgeship we've worked toward? The Barrett women stared from their portraits. They'd survived slavery, segregation, social revolution. Each generation climbing higher, marriages arranged like corporate mergers, children raised to exceed expectations. No room for deviation, no space for scandal. The Montgomery merger brought us connections in 3 states, Shanice reminded. Your marriage to Kimari opened tech sector doors, but this secret... She shook her head. We can't risk everything for someone who built their life on lies. Jariah's hands trembled over the annulment papers. Her mother spoke of reputation, of social position, of family legacy. But beneath these words lay deeper fears, of difference, of disorder, of anything threatening their carefully constructed world. The sprinklers fell silent. Sunday dinner grew cold on Wedgwood china. Shanice waited, every pearl in place, every word calculated. She'd raised her daughter to make smart choices, to put family first, to maintain their place in Atlanta's black aristocracy. Sign the papers, Shanice said softly. End this cleanly. In 6 months, you'll thank me. In a year, we'll find someone suitable, someone real. The word real hung between them like smoke. Jariah felt its weight, its judgment, its power to define and destroy. Her mother offered escape, protection, restoration of order. All it would cost. The penthouse air grew thick with unspoken accusations. Jariah stood in their master bathroom, staring at twin sinks, separate toiletry cabinets, arrangements she'd once seen as marks of affluence now revealed as careful barriers. The annulment papers burned in her designer purse, her mother's words echoing in her mind. 2 weeks of scandal had carved hollows beneath Kimari's eyes, etched lines around his mouth. His custom suit hung loose, stress eating away at his frame as surely as secrets had eaten at their marriage. The Phillips Foundation's withdrawn investment, 4 resigned board members, and the suspended Pentagon contract had stripped away his carefully constructed facade of success. Their bathroom, designed with careful spaces between his domain and hers, now felt like a museum of deception. Every separate space marked a calculated distance, every individual drawer a chosen separation. The city lights beyond their window sparkled indifferently, the same Atlanta that had celebrated their union now feasting on its destruction. The weight of it all pressed down, her mother's demands, the community's judgment, the twisted versions of truth spreading through elite circles. Each drawer Jariah yanked open released new waves of betrayal. Makeup, toiletries, shared memories, now tainted by knowledge of deliberate deception, tumbled into her bag. Their reflections caught in the mirror told the story of 2 people drowning in different oceans of pain. His born from years of hiding, of surviving in a world that demanded binary choices, of building success as armor against discovery. Hers flowing from shattered trust, from realizing every intimate moment had been choreographed to maintain his secret, from watching their carefully constructed future crumble beneath the weight of truth. The perfume bottle shattered against the wall, their first anniversary gift becoming shards of broken promises. Its scent filled the air, mixing with the bitter tang of accusations. Each breath drew in memories now poisoned by doubt. Truth and lies tangled like smoke in the bathroom's artificial light. His truth of survival, of choices made before he could speak, of fear that shaped every decision. her truth of betrayal, of trust broken beyond repair, of a future built on shifting sands. Between them stretched the vast canyon of what could have been if honesty had come before vows. The city lights cast shadows across their faces, turning familiar features strange. Success, that had seemed unshakable now, revealed its fragile foundations. Their separate spaces in this shared bathroom stood as testament to the careful choreography of their marriage. Every division planned, every separation intentional. When his hand caught her arm, the touch sent electric rage through her body. Physical contact that once spelled comfort now triggered revulsion. Memories of intimacy, now tainted by knowledge of calculated deception, flooded her mind with renewed betrayal. The moment stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. In his eyes lived desperation, the fear of losing everything he'd built, everything he'd protected through years of careful silence. In hers burned rage, at his deception, at her own blindness, at the cruel joke fate had played on their perfect love story. Time stretched like pulled taffy in their master bathroom. His grip on her arm, though gentle, felt like brands on her skin. Through the window, a plane's lights blinked across Atlanta's skyline, marking seconds that would change everything. Jariah's mind registered details with the sharp clarity of shock. The marble countertop's cold edge against her hip, the drip of a loose faucet, counting heartbeats, the lingering scent of shattered perfume mixing with evening air from the open window. Later, she would remember these fragments as the last normal moments before their world tilted irreversibly, their reflections fractured across mirrors and glass shower doors, a kaleidoscope of two people caught in gravity's grip. His face showed fear she'd never seen before, raw and primal. Her own expression had transformed into something foreign, rage replacing familiar features. The force of her shove surprised them both, not violent, not planned, just an instinctive reaction to unwanted touch, a desperate bid for space, for air, for escape from the suffocating weight of betrayal. Her hands connected with his chest, muscle memory from years of yoga giving the movement unexpected strength. Kimari's designer shoes, bought for a board meeting he'd never attend, lost traction on imported tiles. His arms windmilled, reaching for balance, for support, for anything to stop his fall. The back of his head found the marble countertop first, physics showing no mercy for past deceptions or future regrets. The sound defied description. Not quite a crack, not quite a thud. Something in between that would haunt Jariah's dreams for years to come. His body crumpled with terrible grace, sliding down cabinets to rest on heated floors. Blood bloomed across white marble like spilled wine. The same marble they'd spent weeks choosing, arguing over veining patterns and finish options. Now it cradled Kimari's head with cold indifference, marking the end of their shared dreams in crimson patterns. Jariah's legal training kicked in through waves of shock. Her fingers found her phone, muscle memory dialing 911 while her mind struggled to process the scene before her. Her voice sounded distant, mechanical, reciting their address and situation with artificial calm. The operator's questions penetrated her fog. Yes, he's breathing. No, he's unconscious. Yes, there's blood. The answers came automatically while her free hand pressed a monogrammed towel against the wound, white Egyptian cotton turning red beneath her trembling fingers. Sirens grew from whispers to screams outside their building. She watched security cameras track emergency responders through their private elevator, heard boots on hardwood floors, observed latex-gloved hands taking over from her blood-stained ones. Each moment recorded with crystalline clarity, yet somehow unreal. Medical terms floated through their marble bathroom. Subdural hematoma, emergency surgery, critical condition, words that would replay in her mind through sleepless nights to come. The EMTs moved with practiced efficiency, their actions a choreographed dance around Kimari's still form. The ride to Emory University Hospital stretched like a fever dream. Red lights painted passing buildings while sirens cleared their path. She watched the medical team work over Kimari's body, their urgent whispers and quick movements, telling a story she didn't want to understand. In the emergency room, fluorescent lights stripped away shadows, leaving nowhere to hide from truth. Doctors spoke in measured tones about pressure on the brain, about time windows, about chances and odds. Their words washed over her like waves, leaving behind deposits of dread. The surgery waiting room held its own particular hell. Every opening door promised news she both craved and feared. Her phone buzzed with messages she couldn't bear to read. Outside the windows, Atlanta continued its evening rhythm, unaware that time had stopped in this sterile space. 3 hours and 27 minutes after his head met marble, a surgeon in fresh scrubs approached. His expression carried the weight of words he'd rather not speak. Behind him, machines were being silenced, forms being filled out, procedures being followed with ruthless efficiency. The medical explanation came wrapped in gentle terms. Massive trauma, internal bleeding. Despite their best efforts, nothing more they could do. Words meant to soften a reality too sharp to hold. Kimari Thornton, who had survived society's judgments and medical interventions, who had built an empire on careful secrets, had been undone by a simple fall. Detective Marcus Wilson had seen enough crime scenes to know when something wasn't right. The penthouse bathroom told a story of wealth, imported marble, designer fixtures, his and hers everything. But the blood patterns spoke a different language. One small pool where the head had rested, then smears from medical intervention. No cast-off, no signs of prolonged struggle. Still, a man was dead. The handcuffs felt wrong against Jariah's wrists. Her Cartier bracelet caught the precinct's harsh fluorescent light as officers processed her, the click of the camera marking each mugshot. Her Miranda rights echoed off concrete walls, while her mother's carefully selected legal team rushed through Atlanta traffic. News broke like a tsunami across social media. Local stations interrupted regular programming. Tech CEO dead, wife arrested, scrolled beneath anchors' grave faces. Security footage of paramedics wheeling Kimari through their lobby leaked online, his still form beneath white sheets launching 1,000 speculations. In the courthouse holding cell, Jariah sat motionless. Her Saint Laurent suit, still speckled with dried blood, drew strange looks from other detainees. Their whispers followed her. Wasn't she that hotshot lawyer? Wasn't her man some big-time CEO? The arraignment passed in a blur of legal terminology. The charges, manslaughter, fell like stones in still water. Each word created ripples that would reshape lives far beyond their point of impact. Judge Matthews, her father's golf partner, recused himself. His replacement set bail at $2 million. Shanice Barrett's pearls clicked like worry beads as she posted bond. The Barrett family machine whirred into action. Private investigators combed through evidence. PR firms crafted statements. Crisis managers reached out to journalists, shaping the narrative before it could shape itself. But truth proved harder to manage than usual. Medical records surfaced despite court seals. Someone leaked details about Kimari's intersex status to TMZ. The story exploded beyond Atlanta's borders, feeding a national hunger for scandal wrapped in social justice packaging. Thornton stock plummeted. The board appointed an interim CEO. Projects stalled. Contracts cancelled. The empire Kimari built began crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. Employees whispered about severance packages and updated resumes. The black elite of Atlanta split into factions. Some supported the Barretts, seeing Jariah as victim of deception. Others championed Kimari's memory, painting him as casualty of intolerance. Sunday church services became battlegrounds of subtle shade and pointed prayers. Kimari's parents retreated to their lake house, refusing all contact. Their decades-old medical decisions faced public scrutiny. Ethics panels debated infant surgery practices. Support groups for intersex individuals held vigils. Protesters carried signs outside hospitals. The district attorney's office moved cautiously, aware of political undercurrents. The lead prosecutor, Sandra Washington, had history with both families. She'd attended Jariah's law school graduation. She'd served on charitable boards with Shanice. Now she found herself navigating a case that could define her career. Medical examiners confirmed the cause of death. Blunt force trauma from a single impact. No other injuries. No signs of sustained violence. Just one fatal moment when skull met marble with precise wrong angle and force. Defense attorneys built their case around emotional distress. They painted pictures of betrayal, of trust shattered by years of deception. They spoke of temporary insanity, of actions taken in moments of extreme mental anguish. They lined up expert witnesses to testify about trauma responses. The prosecution focused on physical evidence, the angle of the fall, the force required, the defendant's martial arts training. They suggested premeditation, citing witness accounts of Jariah's anger, her mother's pressure, the annulment papers in her purse. Media coverage spun narratives in every direction. Some painted Jariah as calculating black widow, others as victim of societal pressure. Kimari became either deceiver or martyr, depending on the outlet. Cable news panels debated gender identity, medical ethics, social privilege. Ayanna submitted psychological evaluations, testifying to Jariah's state of mind. Rashawn provided character witness statements about Kimari's struggles. Both lost clients for their loyalty. Both received death threats from various corners of the internet. In their penthouse, now sealed as a crime scene, 2 lives remained frozen in amber. Half-empty coffee cups on kitchen counters. Unread magazines in the living room. A shared calendar marking appointments that would never be kept. Plants slowly dying without water. A life interrupted mid-sentence. Fulton County Superior Court stood sentinel against Atlanta's summer heat. Television trucks lined the streets, satellite dishes reaching skyward like mechanical sunflowers. Protesters and supporters mingled on marble steps, their signs creating a forest of competing narratives. Inside Courtroom 4A, morning light filtered through tall windows, catching dust motes and tension in equal measure. The gallery divided itself without instruction. Kimari's supporters on one side, Jariah's on the other. A neutral zone of empty seats ran between them like a demilitarized zone. Sandra Washington opened for the prosecution with surgical precision. Crime scene photos flashed across screens, marble countertops painted red, scattered toiletries telling tales of interrupted routine. Blood-stained towels bearing monogrammed initials. She spoke of choices, of actions, of moments that could never be undone. The medical examiner testified first, his pointer tracing the fatal trajectory on skull X-rays. One impact, clean, decisive. The jury watched computer animations of the fall, physics stripped of emotion showing how flesh and bone met unyielding stone. Detective Wilson detailed the crime scene. His evidence bags contained fragments of their life together: broken perfume bottle, blood-spotted annulment papers, cell phones still carrying their last messages. Each item tagged, numbered, categorized. Love reduced to exhibits A through Z. The defense built their case on foundation of trauma. A psychiatrist explained acute stress response. A gender studies professor outlined societal pressure on intersex individuals. Medical ethicists questioned infant surgery practices. Each witness painted pieces of a larger tragedy. But it was Kimari's medical records that shifted the trial's tone. Baby photos marked with clinical notes. Surgical decisions signed by parents too young to understand their weight. Hormone prescriptions charting a childhood spent becoming someone else's vision of normal. Jariah sat stone-faced through testimony, her Chanel suit armor against scrutiny, her expression masked by careful makeup. But her hands betrayed her, twisting tissues into confetti beneath the defense table. Each new revelation about Kimari's past carved fresh wounds in her present. The prosecution brought forth their experts. Specialists in domestic violence outlined patterns of escalation. Sports medicine doctors discussed her yoga training, calculating force potential. Tech industry analysts detailed Thornton's falling stock prices, suggesting financial motive. Social media dissected each day's testimony. Hashtags trended as justice for Kimari competed with Free Jariah. Blue checks debated gender rights while armchair lawyers picked apart legal strategy. Each court session spawned 1,000 hot takes, 1,000,000 shared opinions. In the courthouse restroom during recess, Jariah caught glimpses of herself in mirrors, much like the one that had witnessed Kimari's fall. Her reflection showed someone she no longer recognized. Harder eyes, tighter mouth, skin pale beneath dark foundation. A woman transformed by consequence. When the defense called her to testify, the courtroom fell silent. Camera shutters clicked like crickets as she swore her oath. The wooden witness box creaked beneath her weight, its worn surfaces holding decades of others' truths and lies. Her testimony spilled out raw and unvarnished. The perfect marriage built on hidden fault lines. The moment of discovery. The weight of family expectations crushing against personal truth. That final night when pressure built until something had to break. Cross-examination probed her story for weak points. Sandra Washington wielded questions like scalpels, searching for inconsistency. Each answer Jariah gave echoed against marble walls that had heard countless other justifications, other explanations, other versions of truth. Discovery comes in waves. As the trial progressed, Kimari's life unfolded in court exhibits and testimony like pages from a book written in invisible ink, each revelation illuminating shadows Jariah had never thought to explore. Dr. Sarah Chen, Kimari's childhood endocrinologist, took the stand on a Wednesday. Her testimony painted pictures of a 6-year-old boy who drew himself with question marks where others put simple stick figures. Medical records tracked a childhood measured in hormone levels and surgical revisions. Notes documented parents who saw difference as defect, who chose normality over nature. The standard of care was different then, Dr. Chen explained, her voice steady, but her fingers working worry into her pencil skirt. We thought early intervention would prevent psychological trauma. We didn't consider that the interventions themselves might become the trauma. From the defense table, Jariah watched her dead husband's childhood unfold through strangers' eyes. School records showed perfect grades paired with frequent absences around medical procedures. Nurses' notes detailed a child who changed for gym class in bathroom stalls, who avoided school swimming lessons with elaborate excuses. Marcus Thompson, Kimari's college roommate, testified about nights spent listening through thin dorm walls as his friend sobbed on phone calls home. He'd talk about feeling trapped, Marcus said, his tech millionaire polish cracking under fluorescent lights. About living a life someone else had designed, but his parents had invested so much in making him normal, their word, not his, that he felt obligated to maintain their vision. The prosecution tried to paint these revelations as manipulation, suggesting Kimari had orchestrated an elaborate deception. But their narrative crumbled against evidence of his own struggle. Therapist records revealed a man drowning in imposed identity. Journal entries, discovered in a hidden folder on his laptop, traced years of internal war between truth and survival. Dr. Rafael Jimenez, a leading expert on intersex psychology, explained the layers of trauma. Imagine, he told the jury, being told from birth that your natural state was wrong, that you needed to be fixed, that love and acceptance came with conditions of conformity. Mr. Thornton didn't choose deception. He was taught that truth was dangerous. Old photos emerged. Kimari at boarding school, already building walls of achievement around himself. Academic trophies, sports medals, debate team victories, each success another brick in his fortress of normalcy. Teachers remembered a student who excelled but never relaxed, who achieved but never celebrated. His college years revealed deeper patterns. Pre-med studies abandoned after pressure from parents who feared medical school physicals might expose his truth. Business degrees pursued instead, leading to the tech world where success could be measured in numbers rather than identity. Early business associates testified about marathon work sessions, about a drive that bordered on obsession. He built Thorntech like he was running from something, his first investor said. Now we know what. Bank records told their own story. Regular payments to private doctors, carefully structured medical accounts, a paper trail of procedures and prescriptions managed with precision that spoke of constant vigilance. But it was the personal revelations that cut deepest. Among Kimari's private files, investigators found draft emails never sent to Jariah. Dozens of attempts to tell his truth, each composed and deleted. The timestamps showed sleepless nights spent wrestling with disclosure, courage gathered and lost, words written and erased. One letter, dated 3 days before their wedding, laid bare his torment. My love, I've started this letter 100 times. Each attempt feels like jumping from a cliff, not knowing if there's water below. I want to tell you everything. I want to trust that your love is stronger than society's judgment. But I've spent so long hiding, it feels like truth might kill me. Maybe silence will do that job instead. Their dating history gained new context through evidence. Restaurant choices made for private booths, vacations planned around medical appointments, physical intimacy choreographed to protect secrets, a relationship built on love but staged like a production. Lisa Chen, his personal assistant for 6 years, testified about managing his medical schedule. He lived on a tightrope, she said. One missed appointment, one wrong prescription, one scheduling mistake could bring everything crashing down. He built an empire, while terrified it might all disappear if people knew who he really was. The jury watched security footage of Kimari's last day at Thorntech. He'd spent hours shredding documents, deleting files. Like he knew something was ending, the security guard testified. The timestamp showed him leaving past midnight. stopping in the lobby to stare at his reflection in dark windows. From the defendant's chair, Jariah absorbed each revelation like body blows. The man she'd married, the life they'd shared, all of it existed in new light. Her rage at his deception began to twist into something more complex, understanding blooming too late, like flowers at a funeral. Dr. Ayanna Whitfield, taking the stand as both expert witness and friend, explained the psychological impact of such discoveries. Both parties were victims of a society that demands rigid categories, she testified. Mr. Thornton lived in fear of discovery. Mrs. Thornton Barrett faced the collapse of her understanding, not just of her marriage, but of fundamental human categories she'd been taught to trust. The jury deliberated for 6 days, while Atlanta held its breath. Day 1 shattered the courthouse's practiced calm. A juror collapsed during morning review of autopsy photos, her body unable to bear the weight of decision. The alternate who replaced her wore youth like a curse, barely 23, and now helping decide a woman's fate. Outside, CNN trucks jostled with local stations for prime parking, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like metal sunflowers begging for signal. By afternoon, protesters clashed on the courthouse steps. Members of Black Lives Matter faced off against intersex rights advocates, their competing chants echoing through marble halls. Deputies formed human chains between groups, while journalists captured every shove, every tear, every moment of raw emotion for evening broadcasts. Inside the jury room, 12 strangers wrestled with concepts of intent versus accident, of reaction versus malice. They requested the medical examiner's testimony 3 times, each reading revealing new layers. Blood spatter analysis suggested a single moment of contact. No rage-filled attack, just one push that changed everything. Day 2 brought rain and revelation. A bomb threat emptied the courthouse at noon, sending everyone into wet streets where rumors spread faster than truth. Later, investigators traced the call to a Thorntech investor who'd lost millions after Kimari's death. The jury, sequestered at the Marriott, watched coverage on muted TVs while debating reasonable doubt. That evening, 2 jurors nearly came to blows over the definition of manslaughter. One, a father of 3, argued temporary insanity, claiming anyone would snap under such betrayal. Another, a trans woman who'd kept her identity private during selection, broke down describing her own experiences with disclosure and fear. Day 3 saw Atlanta's temperature hit record highs, the heat reflecting tensions rising inside deliberation rooms. The jury requested surveillance footage, watching the last moments of Kimari's life on endless loop. Each viewing sparked new debate. Was Jariah's move defensive? Did Kimari grab first? Frame-by-frame analysis consumed hours while the city simmered. During lunch break, a courthouse clerk discovered Juror 8 Googling intersex conditions on her phone. The judge questioned each juror individually, probing for contamination. The defense moved for mistrial. Tension stretched minutes into hours until the judge ruled they'd continue with 11, the minimum allowed by Georgia law. Day 4 brought Shanice Barrett's collapse in the courthouse lobby. News cameras caught the federal judge crumpling like discarded paper, her pearls scattering across marble floors. EMTs worked behind hastily erected barriers, while reporters speculated about pressure finally breaking the family's steel matriarch. The jury requested psychiatric testimony as thunder shook courthouse windows. Dr. Whitfield's analysis played through courthouse speakers. Trauma responses exist beyond rational thought. Fight or flight engages before conscious decision. They replayed her words 7 times while lightning turned Atlanta's skyline into stark photograph negatives. Day 4's afternoon brought fresh chaos when a juror found a purple ribbon, symbol of intersex awareness, tucked into her sandwich wrapper. Security footage revealed a courthouse cafeteria worker with connections to advocacy groups. The judge questioned each juror's ability to remain impartial, while protesters outside chanted for justice in competing rhythms. That evening, in their sequestered hotel, 3 jurors sat crying in the communal room. The oldest, a retired teacher, held photos of her own children. "How do we measure a moment of rage against a lifetime of consequences?" she asked. The youngest juror, a tech startup employee, countered with discussions of systemic violence against marginalized bodies. The hotel security guard would later report hearing their debate escalate until 3 a.m. Day 5 dawned with Sandra Washington discovering her car window shattered, purple ribbons scattered across broken glass. Inside the courthouse, the jury requested financial records, Thornton stock prices, Kimari's life insurance policy, the Barrett family trust documents. Money and motive twisted together while demonstrators outside waved signs showing Jariah's law school graduation photo beside Kimari's funeral portrait. By mid-morning, Juror 4 suffered a panic attack during review of hospital photographs. "The blood," she gasped between shallow breaths. "It looks just like when my brother—" Medical staff rushed in. Another alternate took her place, shifting the jury's dynamic yet again. The new juror, an accountant, immediately requested to review the timeline of events leading to that fatal bathroom moment. During lunch, a court officer overheard 2 jurors in heated whispers about gender identity and medical consent. One revealed her own child was questioning gender norms. The other shared stories of religious conversion therapy. Their perspectives collided like storm fronts, threatening to derail deliberations until the forewoman intervened, her voice carrying through closed doors. "This isn't about our stories, it's about theirs." The afternoon brought Kimari's parents to the courthouse steps for their first public statement. His mother, elegant despite grief's ravages, spoke of choices made in fear and love. "We thought we were protecting him," she said, voice breaking. "Now we'll never know who he might have been if we'd chosen differently." The jury watched this footage on their phones during breaks, despite strict instructions to avoid media. Day 6 opened with a bomb-sniffing dog alerting to an abandoned backpack near the jury entrance. SWAT teams evacuated 3 blocks while Atlanta held its breath. The bag contained only law books, a student's forgotten study materials, but the 2-hour delay ratcheted tensions higher. Inside the jury room, alliances had formed and reformed like shifting tectonic plates. The forewoman, a corporate CEO, used her whiteboard skills to map out decision trees. Evidence photos papered the walls, marble countertops, blood patterns, medical records, security footage timestamps. 12 strangers tried to reconstruct truth from fragments while their city waited. Morning stretched into afternoon. A juror discovered his daughter had posted "Justice for Kimari" tweets, leading to another round of judicial questioning. 2 others admitted crying in their hotel rooms each night, overwhelmed by responsibility. The forewoman finally called for a preliminary vote. The first tally split them: 7 guilty, 4 not guilty, 1 undecided. Hours of debate distilled into raised hands and lowered eyes. They reviewed Dr. Whitfield's testimony one final time, her words about trauma and trigger responses filling their stuffy room. The second vote shifted: 9 guilty, 2 not guilty, 1 wavering. At 1:45 p.m., The undecided juror, a nurse who'd kept silent through most deliberations, finally spoke. She described working in emergency rooms, seeing split-second decisions lead to irreversible consequences. Intent isn't always clean, she said. Sometimes tragedy comes from a moment's reaction to years of pain. Her words broke the final deadlock. At 2:17 p.m., the jury buzzed for the bailiff. They'd reached their verdict as storm clouds gathered over Atlanta, nature providing dramatic backdrop for justice's conclusion. 8 years reshape more than just time. Jariah emerged from Pulaski State Prison into Georgia sunshine that felt foreign on her skin. No designer suit marked this moment, just simple clothes her sister had brought, and eyes that had learned to see beyond surface truths. The Atlanta she returned to had changed. Thornton had evolved under new leadership, its profits now funding research into intersex health. The Barrett family name had weathered scandal to find purpose. Her mother now sat on boards advocating for medical consent reform. 6 months after release, Jariah stood before medical students at Emory. Her voice, once used to argue corporate law, now shared harder truths. "We build prisons of silence," she told them. "Sometimes with scalpels, sometimes with secrets, sometimes with shame. My husband died because society taught him to fear his truth. I serve my penance by breaking these chains." Her advocacy work began small: support group meetings in church basements, talks at community centers. But her story carried weight. Medical ethics boards invited her testimony. Law schools added her case to curricula. Parents of intersex children sought her counsel, learning from past tragedy to forge better futures. The Thornton Foundation for Intersex Youth grew under her guidance. Kimari's parents joined her efforts, their shared grief transforming into purpose. Together they created scholarships, funded research, shaped policy. Their work forced hospitals to reform infant surgery protocols, pushed insurance companies to cover intersex healthcare, demanded dignity for those society had tried to categorize and contain. On quiet evenings, she still visited his grave. The headstone now bore fresh words beneath his name. "Your truth lights others' paths." Purple ribbons appeared regularly, left by lives touched by their shared story. "We heal by helping others avoid our pain," she told a reporter on the 10th anniversary of his death. Kimari's secret was forced on him by fear. "My rage was born of betrayal. But truth and understanding can prevent such tragedies. That's how we honor his memory, by building a world where difference isn't deadly, where silence isn't survival, where love isn't limited by labels."